But defendant Donald Trump's project all along has been to distort the truth surrounding this trial, to attack the process, to undermine the judicial system. In yet another last-ditch effort this afternoon, Trump's lawyers tried to get an emergency stay from a New York State appeals court, arguing there was no possible way for Trump to get a fair trial in Manhattan. The response from the district attorney, Alvin Bragg's office, was simple. What the last week has shown is that the jury selection has worked. He continued, we have 18 ordinary New Yorkers who are ready to serve. It would be unfair to them and the public for this trial to be delayed further, end quote. The appeals court judge agreed and quickly rejected Trump's request. Right now, the good news is, amidst all the intensity and the ruckus, the judicial system so far has not bent to Trump's attacks. Despite what he says, the system is working for the former president, just like it would for any other American. At the end of today, a full jury, a 12-member jury with 6 alternates, was seated. Donald Trump's peers, who may ultimately decide whether or not to convict him as a felon. Now, after the jury was selected, the focus turned to what Trump might say, not the lies he spews outside the courtroom, but rather what he might say under oath if he indeed chooses to take the stand. Trump has previously indicated that he plans to testify in this case, and today he's sticking to that story.
President Trump, are you going to testify? Yes.
Now, whether he actually will or not, we shall see. Under New York law, if a criminal defendant wishes to testify in their own defense, they are granted what is known as a Sandoval notice, which ensures that the defendant is aware of the lines of questioning that the prosecution may ask. The purpose is to make sure the defendant is not caught off guard when testifying on the stand. Some of the things the Manhattan DA's office wants to cross-examine Trump about are the 2 civil trials that Trump recently lost, the E. Jean Carroll defamation trial and the New York fraud trial. Judge Merchan said today he would decide on Monday what questions will be permitted during Trump's potential testimony. Monday is also when opening statements and potentially the first witness testimony are set to begin. Joining me now, the aforementioned NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who's been reporting on the trial, as well as MSNBC legal analyst Catherine Christian, who served as special assistant DA in the Manhattan District Attorney's office. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Vaughn, let's start with this Sandoval hearing, this idea that Donald Trump says he will testify in his own defense. He is entitled to know what the line of questioning is, and it's not a given that whatever the DA says he wants to ask is going to be asked. So now the DA, I guess, presents the judge with the lines of questioning, and the judge determines?
Right. This afternoon, the district attorney's office made the case to the judge that a series of other trial determinations, from E. Jean Carroll lawsuit to the civil fraud lawsuit, but also there was a couple years ago, Trump filed the lawsuit against Hillary Clinton and several other defendants, in which he was punished with a $1 million fine for essentially a frivolous lawsuit. And they want to present to the jury each of these different trial determinations to question the credibility of Donald Trump. As the district attorney's office argued today to the judge, they said, look, the defense attorneys for Donald Trump are going to question our witnesses and their credibility, from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. We should be able to build a body of evidence out beyond this case that shows and questions Donald Trump's veracity of the statements that he makes.
Catherine, let's talk a little bit about these jurors. We have 12 jurors and 6
Can I just make one correction?
Yeah.
Can I make one correction?
Yeah.
It is not to let the defendant know the line of questioning. It's to let the defendant know what prior bad acts they're going to ask him about. The other questions he's going to be surprised about. But anything about, prior judgments or prior bad acts, he has to be made aware of that. Sorry.
Got it. So they do not have to disclose things that are not about his prior bad acts. They can
Exactly.
go with any line of questioning they want. But if they are going to talk about prior things that have happened to Donald Trump or that he has done, then he has to know about that.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. Let's talk about 12 jurors, 6 alternates. That's the maximum number of alternates. Typically speaking, a case doesn't run out of jurors and alternates. But as the pressure continues to be on these jurors and or their identities become known, either because the media doesn't handle this well or for whatever reason, is there any concern that some full complement of jurors doesn't make it to the end of this trial?
Definitely, and that's why Judge Merchan chose the maximum allowed of alternates you're allowed in New York, unless it's a murder one case, 6. You already had one yesterday come back and say, on second thought, she can't handle it. Now there's a weekend, so the hope is the 12 that are seated will still remain strong and say that yes, I can still be fair and impartial. But if they're not, there'll be 6 ready to fill in. Of course, we hope the 6 alternates also will still want to be on the jury and can still remain fair and impartial. And, the judge can and the court can do something about making the jurors feel more secure. I think in this case, which was done in Donald Trump's federal trial, the judge should, and it's going to cost money, but court officers should be protecting them when they go to lunch, maybe in an undisclosed location as a group. And they should be escorted home in groups. They all, because they have to, live in Manhattan. So we're not talking about a long commute. So you're not sequestering them. So they're not staying in a hotel, but you're protecting them during the pendency of this trial.
What, in your opinion, how'd it go, the jury selection? I mean, we got it done inside of a week. Seemed to go with relative haste. Those people who were not going to be jurors were dismissed quickly. What was your sense of it? You were sitting there watching it.
Look, Donald Trump's had the opportunity to go and use their peremptory challenges to eliminate several potential jurors that they questioned. And so Donald Trump, over the course of the next 6-7 weeks, is going to become very familiar with the faces of those 12 jurors and 6 alternates that are in there here. But, when it comes to Donald Trump in the courtroom, over the last year, he's become quite familiar with one, not only from the civil fraud trial, but we've got to go back to the E. Jean Carroll trial just in January of 2024. Right. There has been a jury that has heard testimony, granted it was 3 minutes of testimony from Donald Trump, and they did in January determined that $87 million penalty in the E. Jean Carroll defamation suit. So Donald Trump has had a New York jury before rule against him here. And now the question here is, over the course of these 6 to 7 weeks, with that intense pressure that are on these individuals. Of course, we heard them even during their vetting process, if you may, say several of them question, look, I've heard from family and friends, even colleagues who question, am I a juror? And with such identifying, from everything from a neighborhood to their jobs to whether they're married or not, undoubtedly over the weeks ahead, folks are going to become familiar with those closest to them of who these jurors are. Now, for Donald Trump, it's out of his control. It's in the hands of his legal team unless he chooses to testify.
Catherine, let's talk about this business about Donald Trump testifying. He maintains he's going to. Is that good or bad for him, and do you think it'll happen? I
don't think it will happen. He has an absolute right to testify. And unfortunately for his attorneys, they have no control over him, which is another reason why he shouldn't testify. But if he does, I think it will be good for the prosecution case and bad for his case because he's out of control. And this judge will not let him sit there and pontificate. He will have to answer questions. And the judge could just shut him down if he's not following the rules. When I say shut him down, meaning you're off the stand, it's over if he's not following the rules and he's not answering questions. Why? Because there's a jury there. This is not like the civil fraud case where it's just a judge. There's a jury there, and this judge will not allow there to be prejudicial information getting to this jury.
Vaughn, talking about following the rules, there are already some questions about whether Donald Trump's been following the rules in terms of the things that he's been posting. But yesterday, the prosecution the prosecution was supposed to tell the court who they're going to call to the stand on Monday. Yesterday, the defense asked for the first 3 witness names. The prosecution said they didn't trust Donald Trump not to tweet those names, so they said they will give the defense 1 name on Sunday, and, quote, if that should be tweeted, that's the last time we will provide that courtesy. Now, this seems to be a bit of back and forth between the Trump defense team and the prosecutor. Is the judge sounded in on this?
Yes. Judge Merchan, when Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's attorney, went to the judge looking for that request, and Todd Blanche said, well, I can affirm that my client, Donald Trump, is not going to post on social media about the names of these witnesses. And Judge Merchan said, I don't know if we can trust your representation on behalf of your client.
Right.
Essentially a head nod saying, you in good faith be making that statement.
Right.
But we have all seen Donald Trump operate, and we don't know if we can trust that. So what they have allowed is on Monday, the prosecution, they said out of respect and deference for the legal team, they will provide the name of the witness that will come forward on Monday. Court will be abbreviated for Passover on Monday. It'll only go till 2 p.m. Eastern. So we are expecting the initial questioning of this witness, but then the cross-examination will not begin until at least Tuesday.
How does that work practically, Catherine? I mean, at some point, the witnesses will be known. So what's the goal here? And what's the assurance that the court has to have from Donald Trump about what he will not do as it relates to witnesses? Because in theory, there will be a series of witnesses whom we will know about.
Well, there's a gag order, which, in my opinion, he's been violating. And there's a hearing on that on Tuesday. So typically, when you have a normal case and you have a defendant who is not like Donald Trump, you give over the witness list to the defense and you say, and you announce in court, tomorrow we're going to call Mr. Jones, Ms. Smith, and if there's time, Ms. Christian. So the defense will know. And you do that as a courtesy so they can prepare their cross-examination. But in this case, and the prosecutors are right to do this, you don't want to do that with this particular defendant because you don't want him, as they said, tweeting about them and intimidating them before they take the stand. Because the same way we're concerned about jurors being afraid to come to court, the same thing will happen with witnesses. They don't want that to happen to them because when Donald Trump tweets negatively about people, his followers, some of them, tend to attack those people.
It'll be an interesting few days to watch. Thank you to both of you. We appreciate it. Catherine Christian is an MSNBC legal analyst. Vaughn Hilliard is an NBC News correspondent. We appreciate your time tonight. Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.